Hi, Linda.
Okay. Hi, Johnny.
Thank you for taking the time talking to me today. We have over the years talked a lot about the research that has been done in the US regarding the WISC-V and identifying gifted and twice exceptional kids. And we would, of course, in Denmark, like to be able to use this research. You have a few studies in the US that you would like to share with us today?
Yes, I'm excited to share with you two major studies that we've done, and then one study that was done just at our center. So I have the slides, and we'll start with those. We were given the opportunity by the National Association for Gifted Children in the United States to do a national study of 8 sites. And the NAGC gave Gifted Development Center $1,000 to determine what types of score profiles we received on WISC-4s on 334 children from all over the United States. The average index scores varied by 21 points, which was enormous. And 235 of those children, 70%, had index scores that varied at least 23 points. 23 points is very important because in the book, Interpreting WISC-4s, by Dawn Flanagan and Alan Kaufman, they made the statement that if composite scores varied by 1.5 standard deviations, which is 23 points, it rendered the full-scale IQ score uninterpretable, which means that the full-scale IQ score shouldn't even be calculated when there's a 23-point discrepancy. But in the gifted population, in our study, we found out that 235 of the 334 children we studied did not qualify for the calculation of a full-scale IQ.
Wow.
And here are the composite means. Verbal comprehension, 133. Perceptual reasoning was second highest, 127.84, which was close to the gifted range, but only the verbal comprehension index was in the gifted range. Working memory was third, and processing speed was the lowest.
Yes.
Processing speed doesn't even come out to the advanced or superior range. It's only in the high average range. We compared other studies to our study and looked at 5 different samples, and they all had exactly the same ranking. Verbal comprehension was in the gifted range. Perceptual reasoning was close to it, like ours. Working memory was third, and processing speed was the lowest. And that was 5 different samples using the WISC-4.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's talk about the current study of the WISC-V. With that study, we worked with 390 gifted children, again, from all over the United States, from 7 different sites. And our criteria for inclusion was that 1 primary index score, and those primary index scores are the verbal comprehension index, or the visual spatial index, or the fluid reasoning index, or the working memory index, or the processing speed index, was at the 90th percentile or higher on the WISC-V. And these were our research questions. Is the WISC-V full-scale IQ score the best score, or even an acceptable score, to require to select students for gifted programs? What scores best identify the gifted who require gifted programming? What scores identify the critical strengths of gifted children, even in asynchronous, twice exceptional, and culturally diverse populations? And these were our findings. There was a 26-point mean discrepancy that was even greater than in the WISC-IV in index scores. 23 points, 1.5 standard deviations, renders the full-scale IQ score uninterpretable. There was only a 5.4-point discrepancy in the control group that was used by comparison. The verbal comprehension index was the highest. The processing speed index, again, was the lowest. And highest scores were in the subtests with the highest G loadings. And the lowest scores were in the subtests with the lowest G loadings. So let me just clarify what G loadings are. They're very important for understanding the relationship between a subtest and general intelligence. G stands for general intelligence. It's a term that was developed by Spearman at the very beginning of IQ testing in 1904. And I wrote in a chapter, an international chapter, that G stands for gifted. Subtests with the richest loadings on general intelligence, G, are the most useful for locating gifted children. Spearman's G represents giftedness. It is synonymous with abstract reasoning ability, the essence of giftedness. In a very famous book that it undergirds all the current IQ tests called Human Cognitive Abilities by Carroll, and he created this CHC theory. There is abundant evidence for a factor of general intelligence found at the highest order. So with the newer IQ tests, you hear about GF, which is fluid intelligence, or GC, which is crystallized intelligence. But what's really important is that they're all parts of G, parts of general intelligence. So these are the G loadings. They're very difficult to find, by the way, but they're the G loadings of the WISC-V. You'll notice that the highest G loading is vocabulary. Vocabulary is the highest G loading in almost every IQ test that I've ever seen. The next two were information, which didn't do as well in Denmark as it does in the United States, and arithmetic. And those all were considered good G loadings. All the rest in this list are fair. Similarities was close. That was 0.69. Visual puzzles, which is an optional test, was fair, 0.69. Figure weights, 0.68. Block design, 0.67. Matrix reasoning, 0.67. Digit span, 0.65. And these others, all that are in parentheses, letter number sequencing, comprehension, picture concepts, and picture span, are all optional tests or supplementary tests. The ones that don't show up in the first list are the processing speed subtests. And they all are poor, have poor G loading. Symbol search, which correlates with reading, has the highest, but it's still only 0.41. And anything below 0.50 is poor. Coding, which is eye-hand coordination, handwriting, was very bad. That's 0.36. And cancellation, which is really only good for measuring ADHD in children, was very, very poor, 0.21. There's very little relationship between handwriting, cancellation, and symbol search and intelligence. And this was part of our conclusion. IQ tests used properly provide evidence of the existence of children who learn in a significantly different manner and need differentiated education. Individual intelligence scales are more accurate than group tests and provide a better understanding of a child's strengths and weaknesses. Instead of global scores, like the full-scale IQ, sections with the highest G loadings are recommended for selecting students for gifted programs. And we're very concerned with equitability in our schools in the United States. And so we said for equitable, ethical, inclusive, gifted identification, high G index scores that measure general intelligence can pinpoint strengths for individualized programming, whereas low G processing skills indexes can be used to document weaknesses to obtain accommodations. So we're recommending in our paper that was submitted for publication on both the WISC-IV and the WISC-V studies that these two, that the full-scale IQ scores not be used, but that the high G composites and the low G composites be separated out, particularly for twice exceptional children. High G represents intelligence, low G represents processing weaknesses. And this is in our article. The argument could be made that the full-scale IQ should be designed to measure general intelligence, G, instead of sampling from every area, from good G to poor G subtests. Coding is one of the required subtests for a full-scale IQ score. It is a very poor G loading. So here are the primary index composite scores, and they're compared to the control group in the WISC-V manual. Verbal comprehension was the only one that came out in the gifted range, 131.8. And the next highest was was actually fluid reasoning. That was 121.9, and visual spatial is 120.3. They're within the error of measurement. They're very close to each other. And the two of them together made up the perceptual reasoning score on the WISC-IV. Working memory is quite a bit lower, a full standard deviation lower. 115 is the high average range. And processing speed, 105.8, is just very much in the average range. The full-scale IQ score for our group was 126.6, but we have many programs that set 130 as the cutoff point, and that full-scale IQ score would not have allowed many of these children to be accepted. If we take a look at the control group in the manual, we see that the discrepancies only range from 100.4 to 105.8, very close to each other. And we're seeing these major discrepancies in the gifted and the twice exceptional populations. So this is a study that was done of 51 children who were the first to be tested on the WISC-V at Gifted Development Center. We give all four of the verbal subtests to create a VECI, and that was the highest score. That was 134. The second highest score was the VCI. The Verbal Comprehension Index was in the gifted range, 132.6. Then when we go down to the Visual Spatial Index and the Fluid Reasoning Index, they were just high average, 116.9, 118.9. And then when we go to working memory, it's only 113.3, which is quite low. But our processing speed score was so low that the normative sample was actually higher.
Yeah.
Not by much, but that is amazing. Our kids came out with a 104.2 mean score, whereas the control group was 104.7.
Yes.
The full scale IQ score came out 126. So our full scale IQ score for this little study for just 51 kids at GDC matched the full scale IQ score in the 390 national study. But that would not get those kids into gifted programs that set the cutoff at 130. One of the people in our team who, in our assessment special interest group, who is a co-author on our paper is Dr. Megan Foley-Nickpon at the University of Iowa. And she looked at how much of the composite scores and the subtest scores are timed and what impact timing on the WISC-V has on scores. The four verbal scores together, all untimed, was 132.93. The verbal comprehension index, untimed, 131.75. We'll go down to the general ability index, 128.90. That's partially timed. The full scale is partially timed, 126.59. Fluid reasoning, let's jump down there, was only 121.91, partially timed. Visual spatial, 120, partially, that is timed, that's totally timed. And the processing speed, 105.84, that one's timed. So here we have untimed, that highest score. And the next one, the verbal comprehension, are untimed. And look at the bottom one, 105.84 timed. So we have to ask the question, to what degree is the timing of the WISC-V creating the discrepancies in the scores? And here are the subtests, the scaled scores. Similarities, untimed, the highest one. Comprehension, untimed, second highest. Vocabulary, untimed, third highest, but very, very close. Information, untimed, all 15 or higher. Then we get into the timed tests for figure weights where they're only given 30 seconds. Visual puzzles, only 30 seconds. Arithmetic, only 30 seconds. Now, matrix reasoning is untimed, but block design has time limits and bonus points for speed. And letter number sequencing and picture span have time limits for item administration. Digit span is timed, picture concepts untimed, but symbol search, coding, and cancellation, of course, the processing speed items are all timed. So when we take a look at untimed, timed 30 seconds, time limits with bonus points, timed for coding, and these are the similarities, vocabulary, figure weights, visual puzzles, block design, and coding are the 7 subtests that make up the full scale IQ score. You can see that the majority of the full scale IQ is made up of time tests.
Yes.
So this is our discussion. Large score discrepancies may render the full scale IQ uninterpretable. And overemphasis on processing skills, especially processing speed, confounds gifted education and certainly confounds twice exceptional identification. The structural and administration changes in the WISC-V over the WISC-IV pull down the scores, and a portion of our population were either bilingual or multilingual, and their highest scores were also the verbal tests. Using new scoring options, some of which were developed with gifted identification in mind, can help to mitigate such problems. So the statement that I'm making in many things that I'm writing, this is from a different chapter called Assessment of Giftedness in the Handbook of Giftedness in Children. The full scale IQ is indefensible as the gatekeeper to gifted services. Intelligence is multifaceted. Giftedness can be demonstrated in many forms. There needs to be an openness to accepting a variety of composite scores, especially those with high G loadings, when determining qualification for gifted services. The full-scale IQ score discriminates against culturally diverse and twice exceptional children. The reign of full-scale IQ scores is no longer psychometrically defensible. We have a position statement from the National Association for Gifted Children, and it's about use of the WISC-V for gifted and twice exceptional identification. For giftedness and high potential to be recognized, valued, and nurtured, to support children from all backgrounds, respecting their asynchronies. It is essential for users of the WISC-V to be made aware of new scoring options that are sensitive to gifted strengths and to incorporate them into admission and planning procedures. Especially with twice exceptional children, the ability to document strengths and weaknesses separately is crucial, both for gifted identification and for acquisition for services for disabilities. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm appreciated the opportunity to be able to share this upcoming report that is in process now for publication.
And thank you, Linda. It makes totally sense, and it's also our experience that at the gifted, the discrepancies are very high, and the twice exceptional kids even more. So it's totally in sync with our experiences, and we have also done some pull some data from the WISC-Vs we have been doing. So I will share my screen. And here you can see the same. We have the large sample you talked about. That's the US 7 sites, and the other line is our WISCs. And you can see the same, the full scale. It's not very clear here, but the full scale IQ in our sample is 125, and the verbal comprehension is 132. So it's a very big difference from the verbal untimed subtests and index scores to the timed and the full scale IQ. When you look at these graphs, what do you think?
I'm absolutely floored. You have 235 in your Danish sample. We have 390 in our American sample. And despite the cultural differences, the scores are nearly identical. The composite scores are so similar that it's obvious that whatever we've found, you're seeing the same thing, and whatever you've found, we're seeing the same thing. I think we do need to do a cross-cultural comparison and publish it.
Yes, I agree, and I was also astonished when I saw this. It's very promising to our wishes to compare or to use the US research. So would you? We have to dive deeper into these numbers, but would you think that we would be able to use the US research and to be able to conclude as you do with these numbers?
Absolutely. I had a discussion with Susie Rayford yesterday. She is the constructor of the WISC-V at Pearson, and she was also very impressed with the number of children that you've tested and how similar the patterns are. And she said that there has been a precedent set in testing individuals from other countries, especially for special populations like the gifted. Since there are no other special population studies available in Denmark, except yours, or even throughout Scandinavia, your data and its close comparison to the US data suggests that this could be a model that's used for throughout Scandinavia.
Yes, we hope so. Would you, to be able to conclude with the verbal comprehension here, would that be the best way of identifying the gifted and the twice exceptional compared to the full scale IQ?
Absolutely. Your data is so similar, with verbal comprehension index being the only one that comes fully into the gifted range. That showed up in the WISC-IV study we did, the WISC-V study we did, in the Gifted Development Center study we did. It came up in all of the studies on the gifted that were done on the WISC-IV. The verbal comprehension index comes out in the gifted range. None of the other scores, mean scores for the samples, do. And the full scale IQ score is maybe 5, 6, 7 points lower in
Yes.
all of these studies than the verbal comprehension index. I feel very strongly that, given the discrepancy between verbal comprehension and processing speed, that verbal comprehension should be used as the way to identify gifted children and twice exceptional children, and it should be separated from processing speed, which should be used to determine if a child has a visual motor, a graphomotor dysgraphia. There are many different names for it. In psychology, we call it developmental coordination disorder. But if a child has an eye-hand coordination problem, they are not going to be able to do as well in processing speed. If they have a visual processing problem, they're not going to do as well in processing speed, because all of those subtests are presented visually. And it's heavily timed, of course. So the untimed verbal comprehension index is the best indicator of giftedness on the WISC for your sample and for the US samples, and processing speed is the best indication of weaknesses or disabilities.
Yes, and actually we often advise parents to get the kids through auditory processing assessment or visual processing assessment if the processing indexes are extremely low. And often they come back with, there were some problems. And that might be able to explain some of these discrepancies. We also hear that some argue that the verbal comprehension subtests is trainable, that if the parents are talking a lot with their kids, then the kids will score highly on these subtests. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't agree. I feel that all parts of an IQ test are to some degree trainable. So it's not necessary to pick out just the verbal ones and say, oh, that's just the result of parents talking to their children. I think that's nonsense. When I was involved in a study of bilingual children in the southern part of Texas, where the families crossed over the river from Mexico to the United States, what we discovered in working with that population, the bilingual population, was that the children who learned English the fastest, the children who were the translators for their family, they were the gifted ones. And so it's not just a culturally biased indicator of ability. The verbal scores are measuring abstract reasoning ability. They have high G loadings, and even for bilingual, trilingual, and culturally diverse children, the verbal scores are the highest. We tested some children who were refugees from Africa, and their highest scores in the gifted range were verbal. So the attack, because it looks so culturally bound, that the verbal scores look like they couldn't possibly be measuring fairly. But in fact, they are a better way of measuring abilities in culturally diverse children, in linguistically different children, and in twice exceptional children, and in the gifted population than any of the nonverbal tests that we've put together.
Wow. Thank you, Linda, for talking to me today and presenting some of the research that we try to compare our own WISCs with. And we will dive even more into the numbers, and hopefully we can conclude in a short time that the Danish WISCs are comparable to the US WISC, and we can use all the many years of experience identifying and helping the gifted and twice exceptional that you have in the US.
Well, I look forward to publishing with you, Johnny. I think your data couldn't be better. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. That warms my heart. Thank you, Lynn.